So, were you like a foot soldier pimp? Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation, where I review action figures and then articulate 5 points to help you decide if you want to add that figure to your collection. The 5 points I discuss are packaging, presentation, posability, playability, and price. I'm Jason, and if you enjoy my content, please like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube rigmarole. Today I thought I'd do something a little bit different and play catch-up with 3 figures that I'm behind on. The Walgreens exclusive Baron Zemo, the Controller Wave Quake, and the Disney Plus Khonshu Wave Red Skull. Lucky for us, these 3 figures have a common theme. They're all Marvel Legends. That's it, right? Starting off with the packaging, and we do get some variety. Quake comes in a nice standard Marvel Legends window box. Shield logo up here, character art on the side, and different character art on the back. Really good art, if I might add. Daisy was part of the Controller Wave. Other figures we already looked at include Iron Man, Thor, and US Agent. Moving over to Baron Zemo, and he comes in the supervillain style box. It has a purple and green motif. On the side and the back we get this really cool picture. And lastly, Red Skull comes in a new windowless box. I don't hate all the choices here. I just hate the fact that I have no idea what I'm getting, that we don't get any pictures of the other figures that we're looking for, and the elimination of the bio. Every action figure is somebody's first action figure, and that little blurb did at least help somebody who was new to the character. For packaging, Quake and Zemo get 1 whole point, and Red Skull gets half. Moving on to presentation, and starting with Zemo, he stands at just under 6.5 inches. This figure is a fascinating mishmash of parts, both new and old. Starting off with the old, he has Dormammu's arms. The cuffs are new though. His legs are Bucky cap. Not entirely sure about his feet, but his torso is a retooled Spider-Man UK. If you look closely, you can see the groove where they attach the purple piece. The fur trim is new. We see more of that down here. His championship wrestling belt is new, and of course so are his head and collar. The grooves of his mask have been sculpted in, and there's actually paint detail to bring that out. At a time when we can barely get them to paint the lines on Spider-Man, that's actually really refreshing. Next up is Quake, who stands at just over 6 inches. This figure uses Shriek as a base, but does have a lot of new parts. Naturally, her head is new, as is her upper torso. These white pieces are new, but they're just cuffs to go over her leg. At a glance, you might think her forearms are new, but that's not actually the case. They are new insofar as that they're newly sculpted pieces, but they're actually cuffs that slide over her forearms. This will be important during playability. Looking more closely at the torso, we can see a sculpted-in zipper as well as straps. Spinning her around, we can see a nice silver clasp for that harness. They've also done a great job of stamping that shield logo on her shoulder. As for the gauntlets, I love how big and clunky they are, and her simple blue, white, and silver color scheme has been very crisply painted. Lastly, Red Skull stands at just over 6 inches, but just under 6.25. At first blush, that does seem kinda tiny. That said, canonically, Red Skull is listed as being as tall as 6'1" or as short as 5'9". With Captain America standing at 6'2", I think this does work as a 5'9" Red Skull. Near as I can tell, the head's new, and I think they've done a pretty nice job on it. I appreciate the shading in the cheeks to bring out how gaunt he is. The body, however, is completely reuse of the 2018 San Diego Comic-Con exclusive version. Just as Quake has a very nicely painted shield logo, Red Skull has the Hydra signal. Interestingly enough, it's actually sculpted on his left shoulder, but only painted on the right. A little bit of red trim around the collar and around the cuffs, but beyond that, there's no other painted detail. The last time we looked at a Red Skull on this channel was the 2021 Supervillain Wave. For comic readers of my generation, it was the perfect translation of his classic design. That said, I always preferred the black coat version. To me, this is just more militaristic, whereas this looks like he's about to take a jog around the neighborhood to check out some Christmas lights. There's a lot of great leather texture and stitch work sculpted in, but I'd be a liar if I said the whole thing wasn't betrayed by this awful diaphragm cut. I really wish they'd made the entire torso a solid piece on a ball joint similar to this Kang. What I appreciate about this figure is that you could use it on your What If display, your MCU live action display, or on your comic book display. As for Zemo, I think the combination of new and old parts makes him look a lot fresher than he actually is, and the few new parts that Quake has gotten has really helped her stand out from the plethora of Shriek repaints we've been seeing. For presentation, I'm giving these 3 1 whole point. Moving on to posability, and with so many familiar parts, Zemo's articulation is pretty familiar too. From the top, and his head's in a dumbbell joint. So for any of you thinking they just put a purple piece over the Spider-Man UK body without doing a new sculpt, well, nope. You can look up this far down, really great tilt, and all the way around. Swivel hinge shoulders raise up this far. Notice that the fur is a floating piece. Moving on down though, he has bicep swivel, pinless double jointed elbows, and swivel hinge wrists. Moving over to the middle and he has an ab crunch and a waist swivel. When I first saw this belt, I was sure it was going to get in the way. Obviously back is no problem, but it's also pliant enough that forward isn't a problem either. And of course he can twist. Below the belt and he has ball jointed hips. They kick forward just over 90 degrees and split this far. Traversing down the leg and he has thigh cut, pinned double jointed knees, boot cut, and ankles that can hinge and pivot. Quake again is on that new Shriek mold, so she benefits from the added articulation. Fur on the top though, and her head's on a ball joint and a disc hinge. Thanks to her short hair, she can look up with no problem, and she can really bury the chin. No tilt unfortunately, but she can look all the way around. Moving on down, and she has swivel hinge shoulders that raise up over 90 degrees, bicep swivel, pinless double jointed elbows, and wrists that can swivel and hinge. Shifting to the torso, and Daisy has a diaphragm joint. She can arch back this far, which is pretty good, and hunch forward this far, which admittedly isn't as good. She does, however, get really good tilt and twist. Naturally, she has ball jointed hips. They can kick forward a considerable amount above 90 degrees, and do a near perfect split. She also has thigh cut, double jointed knees, and Marvel Legends ankles that do the things. Thirdly, Red Skull's head's in a ball joint and a disc hinge. Of course, his hair's even shorter than Quake, so he can look up this far down. He does have the slightest amount of tilt, and all the way around. Unfortunately, his arms barely raise up 45 degrees. He does get bicep swivel, pin double elbow, and swivel hinge wrists. Shifting to Johann Schmidt's torso, and he has a diaphragm joint and a ball jointed waist. He can only arch back this far, which is terrible, and hunch forward this far, which is also terrible. It doesn't really get any tilt, but he can at least twist. Moving on down, and this long coat does make him pretty much a traffic cone. He does have a slit though, so at least one leg can kick forward a decent amount, and in the way of spread, this is also about as far as it gets. Peeking under the coat, and he does have thigh cut and double knee, but they are basically useless. The ankles work fine though. Of the three, Zemo's the MVP. Of course, I can't speak highly enough of all the extra range that the Shriek body gives us. As for the Red Skull, Johann's articulation is pretty schmitty. For posability, Quake and Zemo get 1 whole point. Red Skull, on the other hand, gets half. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this multiple figure format, give this video a like to let me know you'd like to see more of it. Moving on to playability, and Baron Zemo comes with his sword, but the gold on the hilt is kind of translucent and I don't understand why. I was also very confused to discover that he has 2 weapon holding right hands. At first I thought it was a mistake and that he was supposed to come with a fist, but then I discovered that the one that he comes packed with hinges side to side, and the extra one hinges up and down. For a sword wielding character, that's a pretty cool feature, and I can't think of any other figures that ever did it that way. Obviously an extra fist would have been appreciated, and unfortunately because of those lines you can't just switch them out with yellow hands from a different figure. You can, however, switch his left hand out for another weapon holding one. Thanks to the really good articulation, he can hold the sword with both hands. Switching over to Quake, and she is absolutely the star of the 3. First things first, she has the left arm of Controller. She also has an alternate fist for him. But hey, remember how you can slide those gauntlets off? She comes with not 1, but 2 sets of alternate hands, a gun, and an alternate head so that you can turn her into Maria Hill. Not only is that 2 characters in 1, but since this is a general female shield costume, that means you can also army build her. Have you got the modern Spider-Woman? Bam! All new shield agent. How about Agent Carter, Age of Apocalypse Shadowcat, Sue Storm? The headband might be a bit too Gwen Stacy, but if you put her in a crowd, it could work. How about Natalie Portman as Jane Foster? Here we have the Hellfire Club box set version of Emma Frost. The eye makeup might be a bit heavy-handed for S.H.I.E.L.D., but hey, it's blue. As for Red Skull, he does come with the right arm of Khonshu. Unlike Moon Knight, however, and the paint detailing seems a little bit more haphazard. Of course he comes with the Tesseract because he's the only one in the MCU that loves it more than Loki, and that's it. Remember how this one came with a bunch of hands and 2 heads and a gun, and how it was the first use of this new body mold? Well now, all you get is this. If he'd come with the biggest piece of Khonshu or something like that, I would have understood. But his arm? They couldn't have at least given him a gun-holding hand and a Luger or something like that? Or the alternate gritting teeth head that they literally already made for the last release? If you were curious, here's how one of the comic book heads look on him. I do like the design, but it is just a hair big. Here's the other one. I will admit, I'm very impressed with how well the reds match. And while I do like this, I have to admit that the added size does make it look kind of like a Halloween mask. The other way around's kind of cool. Somehow the colors don't match quite as well this way, and the head's a bit loose. It also might just be a hair too small, but I kinda dig it. If you were curious about the red onslaught, unfortunately this one's peg hole is a bit too small and it will not click in. And let's be honest, it doesn't match in the slightest. Fortunately, playability is more than just accessories or the lack thereof. It's also about how well your figures play with others. First things first, and here we have the Zemo Wave Red Skull. As I said before, it perfectly captures his classic comic book design. It all boils down to your preferred look, and I also suppose your preferred height. For a couple of other classic villains, and here we have Dr. Doom and Kang. I imagine with the release of Quantumania, we'll be getting a new Kang figure soon, but I can't help but feel that Red Skull got a raw deal in the MCU. Moving over to Zemo and Red Skull's arch nemesis, and here we have Captain America. This is the Cap Wolf and Marvel Now versions. The Marvel Now one is a recent acquisition for a possible upcoming Versus with a possible new upcoming Captain America figure. But hey, since this is a pretty Captain America heavy trio, here's a couple of more Captain Americas. The darker blue of the 80 years version goes really well with this Quake, and while the 20th anniversary version might have been better with Zemo, I think this one's better with 80 years as well. For a couple of MCU caps, and here we have America and Carter. The stylized nature of the Captain Carter figure goes pretty well with Quake and Zemo, but this Red Skull could work in either a what-if or live action display. For the other Avengers heavy hitters, and here we have Iron Man. This is the 80 years and Controller Wave versions. I'm really looking forward to the upcoming Extremis one. Readjusting a bit for height, and here we have Thor. This is the 80 years and Controller Wave versions. He absolutely dwarfs Red Skull, but again, Johann is only 5'9". On the subject of dwarfing, and here we have the Incredible Hulk. This, of course, is the 80 years version, and if you thought Red Skull looked small before, for a relative scale comparison, and here we have Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man. Without bringing out any other Marvel Select figures, I think it's pretty obvious that these three won't work with that scale. Still, this does make me wish I hadn't sold my Marvel Select Red Skull from Captain America the First Avenger. And lastly, here's everyone with Stealth Iron Man. Zemo is a long overdue update that we've desperately needed for our classic comic book shelf, and between the double character / army building potential of Quake, she is a must. I really wish I'd given this figure a proper once-over before making my top 10 list. As for Red Skull, he's great if you missed out on the Comic-Con version, but sadly does not have much else going for him. For playability, these two get 1 whole point, and once again, this one gets half. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. Baron Zemo is a Walgreens exclusive, but he's available on Entertainment Earth and Big Bad Toy Store right now for only $25 or on eBay for even less. Quake also retails for $25, but I found this one on clearance at Target for only $8. I highly recommend checking there first. Red Skull also retails for $25, and it should come as no surprise that I really don't think he's worth it. This figure is a shadow of the previous Red Skull we've gotten, and if you want him, I'd recommend waiting until you can find him on clearance. For price, I'm giving Quake and Zemo 1 whole point for a grand total of 5 out of 5 each. As for Red Skull, for price, I'm giving him half a point for a not so grand total of 3 out of 5.
I'll get you next time, Gadget. Next time.
To check out my list for the top 10 2022 Marvel Legends, click here, or for more Captain America, click here. Which one of these three is your favorite? Sound off in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.